When I was 17 years old, I created a monster. Although my intentions were never vile, I do admit that in the dwindling years of my childhood, my careless actions, whilst on a quest for adrenaline, were solely responsible for spawning a truly malicious creature, the likes of which I had never encountered up until that point. It was because of my unfamiliarity with the realm with which this creature resided, I suppose, that I approached the entire situation with an unremarkable amount of caution and, consequently, allowed others to suffer a great deal due to my ill-preparedness. Once I had laid the framework for the monster to emerge, I was quickly thrust into a reality that I knew far too little about, and I was forced to come to terms with my own carelessness in the form of something I feared more than death itself. Let me start from the beginning. From the time I was born to the time I attended college, the small and highly significant town of Arab, Alabama was the place I called home. However, to describe the town as insignificant would be an understatement, and frankly too large of a compliment. With a population of no more than 7,000 people at its peak, if someone were to take a dictionary and look up the word forlorn, they'd find a picture of Arab in its glory days. The town itself was an accident. Our town founder, Stephen Tuttle Thompson, had originally intended to name the town after his son, Arad, but had accidentally misspelled it as Arab when he applied to make his own township official. Needless to say, Arab is nothing more than a product of a careless error, evolving into a wasteland for local businesses and a child's hellscape with only a rotting super Walmart on the edge of town to serve as a place of entertainment, or else suffer the costly and often bothersome trip into the nearest city over half an hour away if someone wanted to go see a movie or go for a round of the lanes at the Bolorama, a favorite amongst kids my age. And so it was a consequence of this desolation that I was coerced into participating in local sports and school clubs into my high school years to keep my idle mind occupied, the hefty majority of which I either flatly loathed or simply was not nearly proficient enough at to judge whether it was fun for me. I suppose in a way that these clubs were beneficial to me, in that they tricked my mind into believing that Arab had more to offer than a mediocre football team and an unreasonable number of churches for such a small area. 7 to be exact. The club that I found the least agonizing was my high school's theater department, more so due to the people it was comprised of than the actual program itself. I auditioned for the fall production of Bye Bye Birdie early in my junior year out of a longing to escape the monotony of school to homework to bed to school again I had subconsciously fallen into. I was fortunate enough to receive the highly revered role of male chorus 3, and I found myself very quickly attracted to a core group of 6 friends also in the cast, primarily for the same reason they were attracted towards me, because we all had nothing better to do and nobody better to do it with. Among my new group of friends were Isaac, the resident self-proclaimed macho man, in a group otherwise comprised of more effeminate members. Caroline, a natural-born leader as described by her teachers that could very easily turn into a meticulous control freak when given enough power, but I never minded in our 7 years of friendship. Riley Grace, Isaac's longtime neighbor turned arm candy once they reached high school. Grant, who was a bit of an eccentric that was keen to follow the group mentality. Cameron, the only openly gay man in the entire theater program. He had acquired the nickname of Loose Lips for more reasons than just his outspoken nature. And lastly, there was Elizabeth, the quick-witted yet reserved blonde whom I had been friends with since diapers. She was new to the program, thanks to my prodding. Caroline had quickly become attached to her, and the rest of us gladly adopted her as one of our own because, like the rest of us, she didn't have any other place where she belonged. It was the first week of October of that year when I finally came to the realization that I was trapped in a makeshift prison for another 2 years that served no other purpose than to thieve away my spare time and claim it was for the further development of my brain. Given my previously expressed sentiments towards my hometown, it should come as no surprise that my mind quickly turned restless. By this point, our theater department was in full swing with Birdie, and what was once a fun escape from the repetitive nature of life every other weeknight from 4 to 7, had quickly reverted into yet another routine, creating a new form of the familiar monotony of school, except with longer nights, intense choreography rehearsals, and the inescapable dread I felt inside the 2 frequent times I messed up in front of my director. And in only a matter of days, I again found myself back where I had started in my quest to alleviate the boredom in my life. And so I decided to get creative. It was nearing the middle of October, so naturally, I was drawn to the more sinister realm of horror as my new source of entertainment. "Let's do something this Friday after rehearsal," I introduced the subject during a water break. "All right, then, what do you suggest?" Caroline inquired. "Well, it's Halloween, so I was thinking we do something scary?" My proposal was met with a combination of raised eyebrows and disinterested silent glances. "Like what? A haunted house?" Isaac laughed at the idea of indulging in something so childish. "The only decent haunted house anywhere near here is all the way in Birmingham, and I don't want to drive all the way there and back, especially after a rehearsal," Grant huffed. "Yeah, and I don't really do scary things to begin with, so no." Caroline dismissed the notion altogether. "Well, I want to do something," Elizabeth spoke up timidly in the face of opposition. "Ooh, I know," Cameron jumped into the conversation. "Let's go roll someone's house." "How does that relate to anything scary?" I asked. "It's spooky toilet paper?" His comment was met with a collection of muted laughter, but for as humorous as Cameron's idea was, it gave me a new idea. "What if we were the something scary?" I proposed, much to the confusion of the others in the circle. I continued my pitch. "Let's go into people's yards, knock on their doors, or leave a creepy note or something, and creep them out a bit." Everyone continued to stare at me, now more concerned than confused. "That sounds fun, if you're asking for a death wish," Caroline was the first to speak up. "What if someone comes out and starts attacking us? What if someone calls the police?" Isaac reveled in this new spin of danger. Both Riley Grace and I sensed Isaac's interest growing, but she was the first to take advantage of it. "Isaac, your dad's a cop. You're not going to take that big of a risk, are you? We could all get in some serious trouble if we get caught. But we aren't going to get caught. We'll do it to somebody we know who won't get mad for us pulling some dumb prank," I pitched. "And if we end up getting caught and they are mad, we can clean up whatever we messed up. It's like rolling a house, but more festive." I was aware that my idea sounded strange, but I was insistent upon not spending another weekend watching Netflix on someone's futon or playing cards in my basement. "Sounds fun enough. Let's do it," Cameron said. "If Cameron's doing it, I'll do it too," Grant joined in. Isaac succumbed to the peer pressure next. "You know what? Why the hell not? I like the risk." "Are you serious?" Riley Grace looked on with distaste. "I've got nothing better to do. And besides, with Cameron and Grant there too, I'll have a better chance of running away and someone else getting caught instead." Isaac started to laugh. I noticed the guys discreetly glare at Isaac for theoretically throwing them under the bus. Isaac looked back at them and defensively held up his arms halfway above his waist, as if to say it was a joke. But he only did so with the slimmest amount of sincerity. "I'm not putting myself anywhere near that situation. That's possibly the dumbest idea I've ever heard, so count me out too." Caroline echoed Riley Grace's sentiments. I looked toward Elizabeth and grinned. "Anyone else?" I watched Elizabeth begin to form words with her mouth, but then she caught Caroline's gaze and she was immediately stunted. Their shared gaze was followed up by a hushed whisper from Elizabeth, followed by another wide-eyed glare from Caroline. Although their exact words are incomprehensible, Caroline's condescending stare illustrated her entire argument. "Okay, so how are we gonna do this?" "More like to who?" Grant continued. "What about Maggie Yancey?" Cameron gestured towards the stage, where our potential victim was posed dauntingly on the stage in the midst of blocking a scene. The priest strutted oh so arrogantly along the proscenium with that smug leading lady smirk. She had acquired the reputation of being a slimy and malicious spoiled brat throughout her high school career, and she remained a vicious jungle cat, the leader of the pack in the theater realm, preying on the frailty of insecure geeks to establish her dominance as our predetermined leading lady. "Let's shake her up a bit. I beamed with excitement at the moment Maggie was pulled into the picture. I knew both Grant and Isaac were also rocking with excitement at the chance to harass the untouchable prick, and more importantly, get away with doing so. "What happened to this being harmless?" Riley Grace spoke up. "That seems pretty cruel." "There's nothing wrong with giving someone a little scare," Cameron retorted. "And besides, the bitch deserves it. She needs something to knock her off her pedestal." "I'm not getting involved in that. I don't intend to make enemies." Caroline folded her arms in protest. The other girls concurred with Caroline, stood up, and migrated onto the stage, leaving us conspirators to our own devices. "Well, for those of us without sticks up our asses, let's get planning," Cameron said. "She lives in the Cherokee Ridge community, a couple streets down from me. We use my pen to get in through the gate and walk from there to keep the noise down. We'll be gone before anyone knows we're there. Sound like a plan?" Our confirming nods had, in an instant, simultaneously solidified our reckless perceptions and the imminent danger we would soon face. That Friday afternoon ushered in a drastic and rather premature shift in the weather. Over a span of a few weeks, the temperate, faded blue sky had devolved into a bleak, gray shadow of its former self. The leaves, which had been highly venerated in their treetop thrones during their summer rain, had all but dwindled out of existence. Their vibrant complexions, comprising of oranges and yellows and reds, that had for so long demonstrated their nobility, had slowly retreated into their feeble, uniform shade of brown. The blanket of night had grown more comfortable with these new conditions as well, timidly egressing from its lair to crawl across the sky earlier and earlier each day, casting a seemingly ever-present darkness onto our town. But what marked that day as so significantly divergent from the normal weather patterns as of late was the onset of a frigid winter chill. Although my town had acquired a reputation for exceptionally cold winters, they were not cold enough to carry with them the inherent mountains of snow or anything in that vein of merriment. Every winter for the last 18 years had merely comprised of frigid rain and the occasional layer of frost caking car windshields in the morning. The rehearsal that night was nothing remarkable. We practiced our choreography, we sang our voice parts, and we walked through the scenes we had blocked up until that point. But all of this stimuli was gradually consolidated down into white noise in my mind as the night drew nearer to its close. My thoughts concerning the act I was about to orchestrate with my friends were flooded with a combination of anticipation and unease. When the wall clock struck 7 p.m., all of the students rushed to the edge of the stage, their shackles to the theater broken on the dot. I fell back to group up with Grant and Cameron, who were waiting to escape out at the back door. "Where's Isaac?" Grant asked, looking around the stage to see if he got caught up in another conversation. "I thought he was already with you guys," I suggested, slightly puzzled. "Oh, go figure." Cameron pointed out towards the mezzanine where the rest of our friends had clustered together. And standing right in the middle, wrapped around Riley Grace's finger, was Isaac. She had placed her arm on his, and she glared at him ever so disconcertingly. I had watched Riley Grace lecture Isaac for over a minute without ceasing, when he extended his arm just enough to graze the tips of her fingers, clearly illustrating the exact moment Isaac had become Riley Grace's subservient. "What a bitch," Cameron antagonized Isaac's faltering character. We walked up to the mezzanine to investigate what had just happened, and caught the collectively condescending glare of the girls. "What are you guys doing?" I asked, catching Isaac's gaze out of the corner of my eye. "We're having a big, safe, legal bonfire at Elizabeth's house right now. You guys are welcome to join." Caroline peppered her hollow invitation with yet another disheartening jab at our intentions, emphasizing each point. "Well, actually, we already have plans," I shot back, slightly pompous. "Doing what? Isaac's coming to the bonfire. Why aren't you?" I looked in his direction, my expression taking on a shape of malice. He looked back at me and he shrugged his shoulders, as if he were actually confused as to why I would be mad at him for bailing. "What's wrong, Noah? It's better to spend the night sitting with friends instead of in a jail cell." I admit I got more flustered than I probably should have, but yet again Caroline had gotten her way through guilt-tripping and shaming people for thinking in a way adverse to her own. "Okay, fine. If it'll make you guys feel better, we'll go to your dumb bonfire thing," Cameron suddenly conceded. I turned my attention towards him, radiating the same amount of aggravation in my expression. And just as a peace offering, we'll go buy some snacks first. Are Doritos and Dr. Pepper okay? The girls nodded giddily. I noticed Isaac and Cameron lock eyes for a moment, and nod slightly as if they were reticently cementing a plan. I'll come with you guys. Isaac hurriedly made his way toward the outer part of the circle, near where we stood. We agreed to meet the girls at Elizabeth's house in an hour, before escaping out through the back door. From the moment we hopped into Cameron's car and turned onto the road in the opposite direction of the store, I began to grasp what their true intentions were. We're not going to get snacks, are we? I croaked out. No, we're not going to get snacks, genius, Cameron mocked from the front seat. My heart swelled with a mixture of reinvigorated excitement in our mission and an unease surrounding our deceit. I didn't necessarily feel comfortable with lying to my friends, especially about something they had already condemned. Grant spurred my thoughts on and he turned around to talk to Isaac. You're welcome, by the way. Isaac, you need to grow a spine for once, Cameron chimed in. You hardly see us anymore because of her. She's such a control freak, Grant picked back up. You haven't been yourself for weeks because Riley Grace wouldn't want you to do something dangerous. You're not fun anymore. Isaac readjusted himself, preparing his defense. Well, I care about her. I want her to be happy, and that means I'm not going to be so... me. This was met with exasperated groans from the car. So you're just going to change who you are for some girl? Cameron interjected. What does it matter to her what you do in your spare time? Grant's final point managed to sway my contrasting emotional states in favor of rejuvenated excitement. I could also tell through Isaac's waning defense that he shared a similar thought. I mean, as long as nobody gets hurt, what's stopping you from having a little fun? My input incited a round of hearty whoops and laughs of agreement from the rest of the car, and it quickly became our mantra for the rest of the night. Our car rolled up to the Cherokee Ridge front gate shortly thereafter, and I immediately felt a massive weight pile onto my shoulders. I became overwhelmed with a sudden dread as we parked the car off to the side of the road near a construction site. I was brewing with apprehension as to whether our childish provocations would actually yield success. I paused for a moment to take in my surroundings. The starless sky displayed a mix of inky dark blue shade and a vibrant purple hue close to the horizon, the product of the numerous street lamps in the area. The street in which we stood was nothing less than desolate, reticent, seemingly void of any semblance of life, or better yet, harboring its usual residence in the thick barrier of trees that enveloped me. The practically identical red brick houses lined the street on both sides in a uniform formation. The white marble monoliths that stood silent and daunting on each front porch seemed to serve as their master's guardians, deterrents from the most vile and mysterious threats. I have to admit they served their purpose well. As they loomed over me, observing me, I assumed the role of an invader in a foreign land. Well, are we going to do this or what? Grant blurted. Come on, the girls are waiting on us. So we hesitantly began our expedition to the home of the high bitch herself, wading through a heavy layer of low-lying fog while simultaneously lumbering over fences and then ducking into the forest to avoid detection. The fog served to mask my boisterous movements, but also managed to hinder my progress as I trudged through the interwoven branches, shrouding the whole of my surroundings in mystery. I couldn't take a single step without grazing a splintering stump or a toppled tree trunk blocking my way. A sliver of light from the crescent moon pierced the cage of branches above our heads, casting light onto a small clearing in front of us. In the edge of the light, I caught the outline of another house. It was the same shape as all the others, but the decorative flag sporting the cursive Y indicated we had stumbled upon our target. That flag stood for nothing more than a symbol of gratuitous flaunting, which fit her personality perfectly. The moon's guiding light granted me a new sense of confidence on my journey, as if some higher being were silently leading me in the right direction, encouraging me to carry out the deed. I approached the tree line, the others close behind me. I glanced around at my friends. We each stood waiting for the others to make the first move. Where do we start? Isaac asked. I simply stood overwhelmed by the grandeur of the house, and the open plain of freshly cut grass in front of me. After another moment, I stepped with trepidation past the line of trees and set foot in the backyard. Isaac followed suit, more confident than me. I turned back towards Grant and Cameron, who branched off in separate directions, moving around the sides of the house. I took note of a motion sensor light above the back door and alerted my cohorts to steer clear of it. However, at that moment, I came to the realization that my plans had not been thought out past that exact moment. I halted my steps and panicked slightly. I directed my attention towards a trash can near a shed to my right and, because I didn't have any better ideas, I kicked it over, spilling the contents all over the backyard. "Dude, what are you doing?" Isaac emerged from behind a pillar on the back porch, carrying a small flower pot in the crook of his arm. "What? I'm sticking it to Maggie?" "Well, it looks like a family of raccoons just stopped by for a quick snack," Isaac mocked as he nonchalantly made his way down the steps towards where I stood. "What do you expect me to do? I want to scare her. I don't want to vandalize her." "You said it yourself, man. You gotta have a little fun," he said before promptly smashing the flower pot on the brick steps. I saw in Isaac's eyes a spark of liberation. He radiated a somewhat sadistic smile with the same whimsy a child might exhibit when showcasing his latest scribbled drawing to his mother. Grant and Cameron copied this motion, turning over the outdoor tables and chairs. I somewhat reluctantly joined in their radical festivities, taking my turn at relocating their outdoor furniture, scattering it across the backyard. If I claimed I didn't find the slightest hint of pleasure from my rebellious behavior, I would be lying. But my illusion of living outside the law was quickly shattered when Isaac took the hoe he was tearing into the flower beds with and used it to smash the shed window. "Isaac, what the hell is wrong with you?" I rushed over to him and confiscated the tool before he could do more damage. "This is awesome, dude. You gotta try this." I cupped my hand over his mouth. "People down the street can probably hear you. Do you want to get caught?" "Guys, I think I hear someone." Grant popped his head out from around the side of the house. I was forced to cut my lecture short. "I'm not letting this come back to bite me in the ass because of your stupidity. Now come on." "Just give me a minute, okay?" I kept my gaze with Isaac for another moment, waiting for him to realize his idiocy, but he continued to stand there, firm in his decision. I was already antsy, and Isaac's reluctance had only made me more so. My body entered flight mode, and I took off, seeking refuge in the wooded area around the side of the house. I ducked under a line of branches and regrouped with Grant and Cameron, who were crouched on the ground, peering through the foliage to look at our masterpiece. "Where's Isaac?" Grant asked, gasping for air. "He's still in the backyard," I said in defeat. "He refused to come with me." "What? What are we gonna do then?" Cameron sounded exasperated. "Should we go back to the car?" I looked around the woods for Isaac again, just in case he had come to his senses. "I don't know where whatever caused that noise went. I'm not taking any chances." Before Grant could utter another word, the backyard was suddenly cast into a pool of bright yellow light. Near the edge of the light stood a tall, gaunt man, with a crooked and hunched spine, silhouetted from the motion light. He heaved violently as if he were an owl regurgitating its dinner. This man, who I presumed to be Maggie's father, proceeded to patrol around the rest of the yard, stepping over the furniture strewn all across the grass. He traversed the darkness without as much as a flashlight, peering into the forest as if he were some sort of night watchman. We ducked down further, practically burying ourselves in the dirt. Several minutes must have passed before I got back on my knees and I was able to see the backyard again. The motion sensor light had switched off, and Maggie's father was nowhere in sight, as if the darkness had engulfed him and he had simply assimilated with it. Several minutes must have passed before I got back up on my knees, and I was able to see the backyard again. Soon I heard the familiar crunching of leaves and exhausted whines of Isaac meandering through the woods in our direction. "So, what did I miss?" Isaac cheerfully pondered, squatting to speak to us at eye level. "Where were you? You could have gotten us all caught." I grabbed him by his shoulder and shook him slightly to knock him out of his jaunty stupor. "Relax. You said you wanted to scare Maggie, and so that's what I was doing. I just needed a little more time." Isaac attempted to reassure me. "What were you doing?" I demanded. "And did you see where that guy went?" Grant jumped up. "You'll see. And what guy are you talking about?" Isaac answered both of our questions in quick succession, neither of which offered me any more sense of certainty or comfort towards the events that had just transpired. "Maggie's dad or brother or someone came outside and went into the woods looking for us. Isaac, do you know what would have happened if he caught you? My paranoia overtook me the more I thought about how reckless that simple operation had become. Dude, ease up already. The point is that we didn't get caught. So will you calm down? I released my grip on Isaac's shoulder, as he spoke again with a hint of annoyance. Now come on, let's get to the car. I eagerly stood up and led a charge out of the woods straight for the car. Next thing I knew, we were driving past the front gate, and I felt as if I were the only person living in an otherwise empty world. The car was eerily silent, as I assumed we were all absorbing the reality of what we had just done. With conscience turning its back on us while the rest of the world slept in peace, we were granted an unprecedented amount of freedom. Forgiving any imminent moral repercussions, what had just transpired in Maggie's backyard was, if not for anything else, a chance for a release of all my pent-up testosterone-fueled energy. Despite my reluctance towards the extent that we took our prank, I couldn't help but laugh a little at the fact that we had just gotten away with something so incredibly dangerous. Neither could anybody else. Coherent words seemed to have been omitted from our vocabulary, and we substituted them with hysterical fits of victorious laughter. As long as nobody got hurt, there was nothing wrong with having a little fun. My justification for our catty recklessness, and our celebration altogether, came to a screeching halt as we turned down Elizabeth's driveway. A lone two-story colonial-style farmhouse loomed far off in the distance, only made visible by a few scattered lights spilling through the windows. The extensive gravel stretch leading up to the house was narrow and winding. The acres of forest that enclosed the property prevented any sort of artificial light from being put in place. I felt a sense of comfort, coupled with unease, re-entering the property, much like the countless nights I had slept over here as a child, and the subsequent times I had snuck out with Elizabeth to go exploring in the endless expanse of towering trees. Our party reached the assembly of cars parked on a small ditch of grass off to the side of the yard. We parked and made our way around the side of the house. Positioned around a small fire pit in the center of the backyard were Riley Grace, Caroline, and Elizabeth. We approached the circle of chairs. The girls halted their conversation right as we came into view. It was evident by their evasive looks that we were the topic of the conversation. So, where are the snacks? Riley Grace broke the silence with her knowing and snide remark. The store was out. Isaac stumbled to find the words as he sauntered over to where his girlfriend was sitting. Out of snacks? Completely out of snacks? Riley Grace gave off a look of stern judgment. Babe, we're here now. That's all that matters. Isaac sought to mitigate Riley Grace's stress by wrapping her arm around his shoulder, but she rejected his offer without another word, shrugging her arm and closing her body off. She seemed a tad more irate than was justified. She then directed all of her attention towards Isaac, lecturing him with her familiar loud whispering technique. You guys are so stupid. Do you realize that? Elizabeth said in a more jovial, sarcastic manner, but Caroline echoed that with a bit of condescendence. I could tell she more disapproved of our antics, but she'd come around. Despite her public perception, she wasn't a monster. She was still my friend. A bit of an asshole, but still. I don't know what you're talking about. I played up this ignorant character with a subtle grin in an attempt to keep the mood light. Caroline turned sharply to look at Elizabeth with a look of disgust on her face, as if she were outright appalled by my attempt at a joke. Okay, look, this isn't anything to get that upset about. Grant tried to alleviate any building tension, but his efforts became futile as Riley Grace stood up, on the verge of tears. Am I wrong to get upset about this? You guys have no idea what you could be getting into. Riley Grace stomped off in the direction of her car without uttering another word. Isaac followed closely behind, vanishing around the wall of the house. The rest of us sat dumbfounded at what we had just witnessed. Any further conversation was postponed for what seemed like hours, as we waited for them to return. However, we finally got our answer in the form of the sounds of doors slamming and car engines roaring. The night progressed awkwardly. Those of us who remained never able to hold a conversation for very long, as our words tended to come back to either Riley Grace and Isaac, or what we had done. The lingering apprehension fizzled out with a dwindling fire. All interest in stoking up another conversation died off soon after, and so we ended up calling it a night rather early. Cameron was the next to leave, claiming his father wanted him home immediately, which left both Grant and I in the inconvenient situation of needing a ride. Grant wasn't too far behind, calling his brother to come get him. I didn't leave until sometime later, though, as I had gotten locked into a small talk with Caroline, trying so desperately to remedy the animosity left over from earlier. Coupled with the expansive trees that surrounded me on all sides, I was accumulating the feeling of crippling and inescapable tension, for one reason or another. I could blame some combination of residual adrenaline and a general minute fear of the dark for this, but that doesn't excuse the fact that I felt genuinely uneasy sitting there. I should go, I said, eager to seek refuge in my home, away from the hostility from the night that seemed to be infecting more hosts as time passed. Do you need a ride? Elizabeth's face perked up, and I caught her gaze through the wafting embers of the now sputtering fire. Well, yeah, but you don't need to, I stammered. No, it's fine, I don't mind. And Caroline was just leaving anyway. Caroline eyed Elizabeth, and Elizabeth turned her head and giggled slightly, covering her mouth with her sleeve, as if she had a reason to be embarrassed. A few flames seemed to reach out and touch her, and the constant orange glow on her face seemed to resemble a wave crashing onto and receding from the shore. We said our goodbyes and hurriedly made our way from the safe haven of the warm fire through the icy chill of the outside air to Elizabeth's car, a rusting and battered Ford F-150. The top of her head barely extended past the door handle. Since when do you drive a truck? I couldn't help but laugh at a combination so bizarre. Since my dad bought a new one. I like it. Elizabeth returned the favor with a playful smile as she climbed into the driver's seat. And he has a name, for the record. His name is Old Red. We had finished coasting off our laughter once we had reached the end of our driveway. I was reaching for anything I could say to keep the conversation going. What a night, huh? I sighed with a vague yet blanket statement as to not tread on any sensitive grounds. Tell me about it. Elizabeth rolled her eyes. Do you think Riley Grace and Isaac ever made up? Her mention of Riley Grace reassured me I was clear to carry on about the sensitive topic. Hard to say. She seemed pretty upset, I said. She seemed to be overreacting a little to the whole thing, right? There's a lot more to it than just that, Elizabeth confessed. She was telling us before you guys showed up, they fight about a lot of things. And this prank was really just the breaking point of it all. I figured that much, I said. Isaac talks sometimes about how she can be really overbearing. He just wants to live his life. Well, she just cares about him, Elizabeth defended. You have to admit he can be kind of off the wall sometimes. And she's not really like that. That's gonna lead to some dumb decisions and some fighting. Nothing major if nobody makes a big deal about it. Well, what do you expect to happen when an unstoppable object hits an unmovable object? There was an awkward silence hanging between us, and I felt uncomfortable speaking in place of Isaac, so I tried to divert the subject. What do you think of all of this? The prank, I mean. What do you mean? Elizabeth asked. You seemed kind of interested at first. What made you change your mind? I turned in her direction and saw her shift anxiously in her seat. My parents said I could have people over, and you know that doesn't happen often. Elizabeth scrambled to put together a logical excuse. I saw the way Caroline was looking at you earlier. What was that all about? She thinks this is pretty stupid too. But you don't? I suggested. Elizabeth seemed to hold her breath before exploding into a fury of words. Being around those girls so often can be so boring. I want to go out and try new things, be adventurous. Elizabeth spoke with a hint of difficulty. I mean, if you wanted to hang out with us guys more, I wouldn't mind at all. I flashed a quick grin, subtly hinting at my underlying intentions. You're right. We don't really hang out as much as we used to. I kind of miss it. Elizabeth smirked, hinting at something more than just her words on the surface. I feel bad because of Caroline. What does she have to do with it? I asked. You know, she doesn't really have any other girlfriends. She loves you guys, but when things or people don't go her way, she can get pretty upset. And if I just abandoned her to go off on some dumb guy's night that she clearly doesn't support, I don't know what she'd do. It's like I'm betraying her. Elizabeth exhaled deeply, as if she'd been restraining herself for a long time. Well, Elizabeth, I declared in a similar manner to a game show host, the benefit of Caroline being your friend and not your girlfriend is that if you're getting bored, you can go spend your time with someone else. And she's going to get over it eventually. She's a theater kid. She's naturally dramatic. I know, it's just that everyone's a little agitated right now, and I don't want to get in the middle of it. She sighed in exhaustion. No, I promised tonight was a one-time thing. It was just for a reaction. They'll die off in a couple of days, and hopefully everyone can just chill for a while. I paused for a moment to see if I elicited any sort of reaction from Elizabeth. I then decided to switch gears, tripping over myself while trying to be more concise with my words and less belligerent towards her friends. You're a lot of fun to be around, and I don't know, we should hang out, like, just us. Elizabeth deliberated on my last statement, and I could feel the embarrassment swell inside of me. Maybe sometime soon, after things die off. She smiled affectionately as we pulled into the high school parking lot, and my anxieties melted away. I thanked her for the ride, and I sped home, longing for that night to come to an end.